Welcome back to the Elite Performance Podcast. Episode 8 today is with Matt Gifford of Next Level Performance in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Matt is renowned and known for his ability to develop speed. So today we talk about all things speed, especially things considering Matt tells us about some of the biggest mistakes he sees athletes make in acceleration and max velocity. Also mistakes that he sees coaches making when they try to work on speed development and things coaches can be doing better to help their athletes get faster for their sports. Next Level is home to J.J. Watt. So Matt has worked with athletes from youth to high school to college and including professional as well. And we also discuss what the difference is working with those different populations, how he structures his weight room or his weight training programs to work alongside of developing speed. And again, some of the things that he uses in terms of cueing, communication, and implanting imagery into athletes' heads in terms of external cueing to make them run faster. Overall, it's a great episode today. Matt shares a ton of great information on speed, and so we hope you guys gain something from it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk to Matt. Welcome back to the Elite Performance Podcast. Today our guest is Matt Gifford from Next Level Performance in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Matt, how you doing today?
Good, Michael. Thanks for having me. Big hello to the viewers. Really excited to touch base with Mike again. I'm going to kind of give the introduction here. Mike and I crossed paths first when we were, in the college days at Whitewater?
Absolutely.
Mike was an all-star wide receiver, track athlete, basketball athlete, I believe. And luckily for me, he didn't take my job at Whitewater. He ended up going to a different university to allow me to finish out with some grace at Whitewater. But it's good to cross paths with Mike again.
Awesome. Let's get right to the point now. So you're known for your knowledge and ability to develop speed. So kind of where did this interest begin?
So speed training first kind of grabbed my heart and captivated my eye in the 96 Olympics when Donovan Bailey broke the world record. Ran in 984 at an electric setting. Michael Johnson that same week ends up running 19.32. And it was such a cool venue. It was just a cool atmosphere to watch. And then I realized it could help me getting faster with being a football player because I kind of grew up idolizing wide receivers. And I figured if I get faster on the track or, in my cul-de-sac, it'll help me play football and score more touchdowns. So I think I was 11 or 12 years old. My grandpa bought me my first speed training book. And it was written by Tom Tellez and George Dinteman. And Tellez is obviously a godfather of sprinting and track and field. So I was exposed to him and got to see pictures of Leroy Burrell that also kind of captivated my eye. And that kind of led me to, I guess, the upstart of dial-up internet, where I was led in the right and wrong directions multiple times. Like any kid, you search out the fastest guy in the world and try to figure out what his coaches are doing. And I remember, it's kind of funny 20 years later, but coming across a PDF of contrast between Maurice Green and Donovan Bailey's training. And I kind of wanted to pattern things off of Maurice Green because he was the faster athlete. And luckily enough, Dan Paffis kind of steered me back in the right direction almost 20 years later. But, my interest was sparked in those early years, and then in high school and college, it kind of took off at the university level. And in the early 2000s, that's when like the internet and underground strength conditioning boom took place with guys like Martin Rooney and Joe DeFranco. And it's definitely been a catalyst for me to end up at Next Level and kind of pursue and carry out my passion.
Awesome. So let's talk about Next Level. What kind of athletes are you working with? And as a caveat for the listeners, Next Level is known or, home of J.J. Watt, who you guys have developed since a high school kid to now arguably the best player in the NFL. But what kind of population are you dealing with at Next Level?
Yeah. So JJ is our poster boy, and he's trained exclusively with Brad Arnett, our owner and lead trainer. But JJ started in high school, so that's kind of our bread and butter. We work with athletes as young as 10 or 11, so youth athletes. We work with a lot of middle school, high school, and college athletes of every different make and model. So I never guessed I'd be working with so many swimmers, which is, kind of how I spent a lot of Friday nights early in my career training swimmers at the back end of their training week. But then we've also got certain professionals, probably about 5 to 10% of our population is, in NFL or MLB or whether it's basketball in Europe or MMA. And then we have a lot of adults. So the beauty behind it is that it's been an awesome atmosphere to kind of lateralize my thought and develop a good base in terms of communication. And then, the whole goal of coaching is obviously to simplify things for your athletes. And it's been really nice to be able to kind of work back and forth hour to hour. So things change. Maybe 1 hour I'm working with high school kids, the next hour is with youth kids, then maybe adults. So it's allowed me to be, very diverse in terms of coaching and figure out what the generals are that apply to everybody as well.
Awesome. So now you also work with some NFL combine prep. And so including that and then your normal team sport athletes, what are some of the the three biggest mistakes you see in acceleration in team sport athletes? Technical, mechanical, whatever you want to go out that aspect.
Yeah, I would say they're both. I mean, honestly, the first one is, where do you start? And, when you look at acceleration training, look at all the limiting factors. I think, using the adage, we always put the cart before the horse. We put kids in positions and expect certain things out of them that they're just not ready for. So it's really important for whether working with young athletes or these, college prep guys or NFL prep guys, to follow the same progressions you're going to follow, with everybody else. So first of all, you got to know that mobility, core stability, and general strength, and I guess just body awareness have to kind of precede whatever they're going to do. So if kids don't have the ankle mobility or the hip mobility, they're not going to be able to find certain positions. So I think when it comes to acceleration specifically, just developing progressions, and I think not utilizing the weight room correctly, working back and forth, because the biggest thing is to have cohesiveness and congruency in your program where you can allow your athletes to make connections from, their mobility work, their stability work, their strength work to the turf and the sprint work.
Awesome. Same kind of question. So what are the three biggest mistakes?
One, maybe I need to.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said, did I cover your question?
Yeah. So let's say if we retrack a little bit. So what are the, say, technical wise, you see an athlete for first time go through a 10-yard sprint, or you're putting them into a 2-point or 3-point. What are some of the three biggest, say, technical mistakes you see athletes making in acceleration?
Yeah, great. I'll break it down. So the setup, not understanding how to create tension and put themselves in the right position. So understanding tension through the ankle, hip position, upper back position would probably be the first place to start. I would say rushing their first launch and their projection. A lot of kids will rush that right off the bat. And those are the kids that, typically they go nowhere fast. And then it also depends on what kind of, background they have. A lot of the college football kids I'll work with are really push biased. Yeah. So they'll spend too much time pushing, and it becomes a highly pulling activity for them. So I would also say, with that, I always tell my guys the first couple weeks that it's really unique with speed because you often have to slow down to go fast. So I think when working with new guys, understanding all the things I just said, we always think of speed in terms of 100% intensity, and just getting kids to be patient, with their first step projection and understanding how to carry out body positions will really help coaches and help the athlete eventually reach top speed, because we always think of it as acceleration is what? I got to get from point A to point B as fast as I can. And in all reality, we know acceleration is all about pushing oneself into upright max velocity position. But it's all about how you get there. And I think when you kind of simplify things, but almost get a little esoteric with guys and teach them how to be more patient, it pays big dividends in the race model. And then obviously with technique and, with setting up that 40-yard dash or whatever event-specific task you need to train the athlete for.
Awesome. And now you've talked a lot about, say, acceleration, getting the athlete's attentional focus, and you're big into kind of external cueing. So what are some of your favorite external cues that you'll use, say, to develop acceleration mechanics? Or help give them the image of mechanics?
Yeah. So I would say, back to what I originally said, if you've got a great warm-up, if you're working certain movement pattern efficiency exercises, teaching kids how to squat, how to hinge their hips, how to plank and brace and create stiffness. It's really easy when you teach a kid speed work and break down the setup and their first step position to pull from what they just learned and what they just worked on. And that's just that simple concept of transfer of training. When it comes to, first step and first launch, kind of going back to what you're doing to the technical work that precedes that, teaching kids how to jump out like a broad jump or project their hips, much like the med ball throws or jumping exercises or Olympic lift derivatives they've used before will really help kids. Just creating a picture. And, some of the newer ones, or the older ones, I should say, that I love, started back from watching, guys like Maurice Green, when his coach used to say, you have to rise up like an airplane off the runway. That's just an awesome visual for young kids, and for older athletes as well. We've talked about in the industry and with Nick Winkelman's help and some articles I've written about being biased to certain cues. So it's really important to figure out, whether it's a mechanical issue with their body or whether it's a technical issue in their head, but then cater to whatever issue they have and cater to whatever type of athlete you want to classify them as.
And so what are some things that how you figuring out where their bias is in terms of push versus pull, or they're biased towards, timing?
That's
them,
where I think slow just video really will help. Really important. And like an Olympic lift, you're looking at ankle, hip, thoracic, spine area, kind of taking it all in. But definitely once you put that camera to it, it's a lot easier to see things. And, I think the worst cue you could give a kid is to stay low. That's been the worst cue. And ever since, the drive phase was popularized, with guys like Maurice Green, that old HSI sprint crew in the late 90s, every track coach or football coach probably force-fed that to their kids, that you have to stay low when you accelerate. So what I always use the analogy with my kids is, I'll put my head down and say, hey, can I do this at top speed, 50 or 60 meters down the track? And they always say, yeah. And we know that your head should just be a reflection of whatever your torso is doing. And realistically, your torso should be a reflection of whatever you want in terms of vector angles and force angles from the ground up. So if you're pushing, in theory, your head should probably match whatever shank angle you're creating on the lower half or torso angle you're creating. So getting kids to kind of make that connection is really, really important. And again, that's where you kind of lock in a context. A big cue I kind of stole years back was from Charlie Weingraf. And I remember watching or reading his website back when I used to read it. He was talking about packing the neck or making a double chin when athletes deadlift. And I thought that was genius. And then I thought of that airplane cue I used to give kids. And I said, that's just the easiest way to lock in the nose of the airplane, and to lock in that plane or the top of the head will help create neutral spine, which will then in turn get the kid to, understand patience when they sprint out of the first step position.
Absolutely.
So it's funny how you can make connections with kids, but the important thing is, like we talked about earlier, to lateralize your thought. It's really easy to pull different concepts from different, pieces of information that might filter back into speed training. Yeah.
And I love your concept of using the warm-up, obviously as the warm-up, but also to build some context in terms of we're going to build off of this later. It's like school. Like, you're not going to go to calculus without learning basic, math first. And so, how do you use your warm-up into what concepts are you using your warm-up to use that context for later kind of speed development or even weight room development?
Yeah, great question. So everything we do, from a training standpoint, I think as coaches, but definitely at next level, is progressionary based. So, these certain basic progressions and movement pattern progressions should force feed the kids into the next exercise. So starting with the warm-up, one of the first places to start is basic planking exercises or developing, a foot tripod. We always talk about kinesthetic awareness and coordination, in the industry now. And, the Franz Bosch stuff is so cool and it's really unique, some of the theories, but, coordination might not be jumping around. It might be just working on creating a foot tripod with the lower half. And I don't know how many times I see a parent tell me that their daughter, who's 12 years old, is a okay volleyball player, an okay basketball player, but she needs to become more coordinated. And you just look at her foot, and she's completely collapsed. She's total overpronator. She's knock-kneed. And all of a sudden, you just teach a kid how to establish a tripod, and they get a little more intrinsic foot strength. They get a little more hip stability, and voila, all of a sudden they're more coordinated. It's kind of funny how that works. And, you get mom and dad thinking their kid is just some type of, cyclops mentally, and it's just a strength imbalance. So the warm-up is obviously easy context for hip position. I always refer back to, a squat or a single leg RDL. Kids are learning how to create knee bend, how to create a little bit of movement at the ankle, how to create movement at the hip, how to hold their upper back position. Those concepts will filter over to your setup position in a start. The plank, one of the hardest things that you and I probably work with high school and youth kids is you can set them up in the best position. All of a sudden, once they make that initiation, that first launch or first impulse, they round their backs, and they fork over at the hips. Well, if a kid can't hold a plank or doesn't understand, how to create tension in that plank position, you're never going to see it, obviously in a dynamic setting. So, we always talk about is with the assessment process at next level, sometimes parents will ask, well, why aren't you sprinting, Johnny or Sally? And we just know if a kid can't hold posture position in a static setting, when things start to pick up in terms of complexity and pace, they're never going to hold position trying to run a 40-yard sprint. So those progressions are really important, and that you have to have certain teaching positions. You look at, people love to bash the FMS, and it's got its place. It's not the end all be all like sometimes certain people want to preach and practice, but the hurdle step, the lateral deviation or is laterally chained, then you can run all the wickets you want or do some really cool exercises, but you're going to be beating your head up against the wall.
Yep.
And that's basic. I think exercises and general strength exercises will help to develop certain limiting factors and imbalances, but also provide activation, another big word we might explore later on, to help our kids get more out of what they're already doing.
Yeah. So let's back to the assessment. What do you guys look at during your assessment? What do you guys all looking at for the athlete? Is it static, dynamic? What are you guys all addressing in that assessment eval?
Great question. It's a great spot just to break the barrier, the relationship barrier. So, to kind of create a certain level of comfort with the athlete, and maybe parents are in that room as well. With parents, you can tell right away what kind of condition they have. Sometimes we do an assessment and a kid is looking at mom and dad after every question you ask.
Yep.
Right away, what the first couple sessions may look like, or mom or dad answer. So hopefully we'll explore, that mental component. We'll take a goals analysis, to see where the kid wants. It's also a great time to kind of introduce, nutritional questions and ask tidbits, about that. It's a great time to figure out, goals and what the kid really wants. And, it could even be, a 30-minute window might even be a spot for a 2-minute spiel on motivation. Set the expectations up before a kid even walks through your doors. So we always say there's two things we won't coach you, and that's attitude and effort. And it gives the kids and the parents a little bit of time to think about what we expect out of them, in the standard of excellence we set for them. But when it comes to hands-on body, we'll take a body comp, reading on the kids first and foremost. That's the first place we start with the poking and the prodding. And body comp for speed training is obviously easy. If our kids want to get really fast, we know the lower body comp is going to help them. That's not rocket science. It's just taking extra weight off the car, right? So it's an easy point for us to just talk about, hey, you say you want to be a 10 out of 10 athlete, but you're telling me your diet's probably a 5 out of 10. We'll control the controllable. So it's kind of setting the tone there. Along the lines of diet, every kid that walks these doors is always greens deficient. They're not getting enough phytonutrients from greens. They're probably dehydrated. If they're a young kid or a girl, you can sure as hell bet they're not getting enough protein in their system, or healthy fats. So easy window for talk about that. And when it comes to the actual FMS-based approach, we'll just look at their posture. We'll just have them jump up and down, try to get them into a comfortable setting. We'll look at the ankle first, see if there's any, big calcaneal inversion, if there's some type of navicular drop, look where their feet are at. We'll work up to the tib fib, see if there's any spirals or rotations there. Look at the knee and the hip. Assess hip position right off the bat. A lot of our kids are fighting anterior pelvic tilt. So that's an easy spot to address whatever inefficiencies they're going to have with finding, proper pelvic position when they sprint. And then most of our kids, they're all going to have some type of kyphosis up top. They're sitting in a chair, maybe some forward head posture, but easy ways to identify what we might be fighting against the first couple sessions. And, it's going to allow us to set the tone, for their first couple weeks. We'll take a look at some of the FMA-based exercises, the overhead squats, an easy piece. I'd say probably only 10% of the kids I'll ever see squat. So we know, figuring out what's going on with their kinetic chain is going to help us there. But it's just we can't, we know that, and, single session.
Absolutely. Just for curiosity, what are you guys using for body comp? Because that's something that I found problems in terms of I don't have a bod pod or I can't do water immersion. What are you guys using for body composition?
We use the good old fashioned calipers. Yeah, it's an easy spot for us to start. And, genetically, everybody's going to be a little bit differently. I don't have much experience with it, but I know Charles Poliquin does the biosignature method and looks at, fat deposits and where it's going to relate hormonally. I'm not there with 99% of my athletes, so I don't get too worried about that stuff. It's just a good marker and metric for us to track, and it's just an easy spot to honestly smack them with the truth. Kids have all these goals, but, we often forget about the easiest things. And it's always a good spot to start, and it has validity for a reason. For all the high school coaches, ask your kids what they eat every day. It's just that simple. I used to, with my younger kids, when they're in 5th or 6th grade, it was literally as simple as, hey guys, how many fruits and veggies did we have today? And I think a lot of us can be elitists with information out there with diet or with anything, all the new information and cool research. And the biggest thing is you're never going to make an athlete perfect, but your job is to create some positive change. So, instead of preaching about going from 4 to 6 fruits and vegetables a day to 7 or 8, it's about making, long lifestyle changes and habits. So instead of taking a kid and saying, hey, I want you to start eating perfect. Hey, just please eat a salad for me. I tell my kids all the time, like, I don't care if you don't like greens, dip it in ranch dressing. The healthy fats will help you absorb the nutrients better. And that's where we start sometimes. Guacamole, it's a power food for us. So it's almost kind of tricking them and working with them to create long-lasting change.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel 100%. Just, get them to eat maybe a breakfast or have eggs for breakfast instead of a Pop-Tart, or just,
right.
All those little things, like, like you said, you don't need to do a complete 180. Just if you add one veggie, cut a Gatorade out, eat a breakfast, all of a sudden now we're talking about some substantial changes that they can continue to do forever.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's just setting breadcrumbs along their trail.
Yeah.
People get so enthralled with, like I said, new information. All of a sudden they want kids to jump across the Grand Canyon for them. Then that's never going to happen,
Yeah, absolutely. Back to speed here for a second. So we're going to go back to – let's go talk about some max velocity or top-end sprinting speed. So where's 3 of the biggest mistakes you see in terms of mechanics or technical-wise in terms of max velocity in team sport athletes?
Yeah. So I guess first and foremost, and what I'm getting better at and still probably horrible at is coaching less. I think Charlie Francis said it best. Sprinting is a hindbrain activity, and when we overcoach, it becomes more of a forebrain activity. So knowing when to shut up and letting the athlete just do what they need to do is really important, and it's something I still need to get better at. With every single training week. But I would say right away with the sprint position, it's not developing progressions. For me, it's going to sound funny to teach a kid how to sprint upright is ability ball dead bug. And my kids all, if you can't hold a dead bug position on your back where gravity isn't an issue and we're working at a very slow speed, you will never hold position and get like a perfect stance phase or recover the foot or get great front side thigh position when you sprint. So if you look at the dead bug, It's neutral pelvic position exercise. One hip is flexed, one leg is extended. You're probably using opposite arm, opposite leg. It's just an easy reference point for people, just to understand position. And then I'd say from there, not using proper prep exercises. You're going to use old school methods with kind of the new school methods. The Franz Bosch stuff is pretty cool. Getting kids to hold front side thigh position is huge, but it's all about what kind of progressions you get, to take kids there. With that being said, we know if we want to get kids faster, eventually you have to sprint at 100% speed. But you should be working on certain patterns and positions that's, doing wickets and cool things like that are great. But if you don't have the space, just getting a kid to understand tempo run position will really help them. So tempo running kids at an early age, really important. And just making the connections back and forth. We know in this industry that speed training is the most important to get an athlete faster, but like we just talked about, there's so many limiting factors towards it. What good is running flying 20s with kids when their movement quality is really shitty?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Going from my experience in high school and even in college, and I'm sure yours is a little bit similar, but when I thought about speed training in high school with coaches or in college, it turned into like more of a conditioning thing. So, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see, like speed killers or mistakes coaches are making, team sport coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, when trying to develop speed in their athletes?
Yeah. Number one, at the college level, letting and I'm probably sounding like an elitist right now, but oftentimes, unfortunately, a lot of the sport coaches will dictate what strength and conditioning coaches have to do. I just had a kid from the University of Michigan, and his baseball coach has him running 110s. That's their speed work, and that's how he thinks in his head that they're developing speed. So I'll probably always start with kind of that Charlie Francis short to long model, in that, we're going to work 5-10 meter sprints first and foremost. We have to develop the capacity over time to get into higher end things, but progressionary based thinking as well. If a kid can't sprint, period, what good is it going to be running 20 and 30 meter sprints if they can't master the start in their first 5 yards? So I would say breaking things down there. Conditioning, we always say the sport itself should be, a tool to develop conditioning as well once the season starts. And I think if you look at football specifically, I think the hardest part for, strength and conditioning coaches at the football level or at the high school level, a lot of, high school coaches that are dual-role strength and conditioning coaches, they start running kids and using the gassers early on in the year. And we know early on is the time to develop strength and, I guess more importantly, speed, and use strength as a means to enhance that speed. So it's starting with 5s and 10s. It's understanding that, hey, if you want to do change direction agility drill work, your kid better be able to accelerate first and be able to stop and absorb force. Plyos, the use of plyos, that's just obviously a great tool to develop the ability to produce force and absorb force. So what good is it doing hurdle hops and tuck jumps if your kid can't do a squat jump? And if your kid can't squat correctly, why should he even be doing a squat jump in the first place? So it's developing progressions and I guess guidelines and standards where kids have to kind of check themselves off those lists first and foremost, And I think a lot of coaches forget too, maybe my kids aren't ready for high-speed hurdle hop work or sprint work at 40 to 60 meters, but they're going to get certain biomotor qualities from the little things they're doing. A pogo hop or rudimentary hop is going to be teaching the athlete how to create stiffness or how to create body awareness. And you can check that off the base earlier on. So instead of doing hurdle hops for the kids that aren't ready for it, do pogo hops, work more on stability and strength work. And once they're ready for it, it makes things so much easier from a coaching perspective, but also from, a sticking perspective on your end.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we'll walk us through a typical session for you. What does a typical session look like start to finish?
Yeah. Kids will get here early. They'll probably get here 10 minutes early to start foam rolling or use whatever self-myofascial release tool they want. We start a warm-up. We kind of have our, cornerstone next level warm-up. We'll go through some type of 20-minute warm-up where we're going to warm up core temperature. Obviously, we'll do some hopping exercises. It's also movement pattern awareness. We'll get them to the ground. Our ground-based mobility and glute activation series is really important for us because we know kids don't have hip strength. Open certain things up, so you're just obviously reducing compression and promoting length with the warm-up as well. And then we'll spend time at about the 20-minute mark, maybe using some type of traction or just exercise that Kelly Starrett's kind of type of like general strength push your chain exercise, because we know our kids are all deficient there. And then we'll spend a little bit of time just working basic neutral pelvic positions. Again, which is going to be great context later on when you want to teach sprint pattern stuff. But it's also really important, obviously, from an injury reduction standpoint to work on all those things. So that's 25 to 30 minutes of training that if you're doing it 4 days a week is going to add up to 50, 60, 70 hours over the course of a year working on these healthy things. After about that 30-minute mark, we'll do some core rotational work on their feet. That's going to develop thoracic spine rotation, on core stability on their feet, which is going to translate to movement. It's also going to be great context for change direction work or for work. And then we'll get into sometimes. Now that process can kind of change depending upon the athlete and the training age. But if you look at the Olympic lifts, they're obviously really important for postural strength, for force production, but most importantly for us, for the things we want them to do on the turf. And if you look at a hang clean or a snatch, it just starts out with just like your sprint work. It starts out with a setup there. You have to hold position, just like what we're asking for when kids sprint. You have to produce force and then absorb force, just like when we sprint. So it's going to help make connections. And it's just another easier way to train what you want to train on the turf in the weight room. So it's really important from a teaching perspective and also obviously from a training and performance perspective to coach it and use it. Now I always tell coaches and athletes, if you don't know how to do it, or you just feel like I can't coach 60 guys in the weight room using the Olympic lifts, then don't. Or develop progressions that will eventually get you there, when the athlete's a junior or senior, where he can start with, an RDL to a clean shrug or a clean pull. So again, it's just being patient with these progressions. That'll take us up to get us back on a track to about the 40-minute window. We might do some type of postural strength exercise for acceleration or deceleration, which is just going to help with movement pattern refinement and teaching kids certain positions. And then movement training for us is going to be pretty but deliver it probably 15 to 20 minutes, depending upon the time of the year and where the acceleration direction. If you're working with a track athlete, you kind of bridge the change direction, the maximum velocity work together. And it just depends on the template. Hopefully, we'll give them 48 hours of rest in between. If you're a football guy, we'll break up that template to maybe Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And again, there's so many different ways to skin the cat. I always say over the course of 4 years, your body's going to remember not necessarily the order of your training week that you did Monday and Thursday, lower body or upper body, just that you're working on certain principles. And, I think early on, you and I both can attest, you get so lost in the X's and O's that you figure out, what, I gotta kind of have to take the middle way. And as long as I'm giving healthy things, there can be some deviation from a perfect program.
Absolutely. So let's say in your program and in general, maybe your training program or with your athletes, what this year looks different than, say, in years past? What have you changed or altered, say, this year you're working on or experimenting with that you haven't been in years past?
Yeah, great question. I would say, program's only as good as it's coached. So that's been obviously big just to figure out what I need to coach better with. But, I think still the role of strength and speed development is huge, and we'll probably have endless arguments with it as far as we go. But I think I've done a better job over the last 2 years of understanding that strength, with certain training ages is going to be secondary to the actual speed work. Understanding that I always skin the cat and do maximal. So I think structuring things in different zones, Stuart McMillan's been awesome for my career and for my thinking, with figuring out that, listen, too much maximal strength work will probably dampen certain qualities. I need to figure out how to optimize that density a little bit better on. But I would say with my kids, the big thing is understanding, their lifeline and just where their training needs and limiting factors and goals are and how to plug them in. My speed work with my older kids that are track athletes, I'm going to spend less time in the weight room and more time sprinting. And that's something that I've kind of been more committed to. I would say giving the athlete a little more say in what they want to do has been beneficial for my career, and for their buy-in as well. And, some kids don't like that. So hopefully you're going to help nurture that quality of making them in charge of their own program. And it also depends on, I guess, on the personality type and whatever personality profile they have. Some kids want direction. They want to be told exactly what to do. Some kids will benefit from it more if you can kind of let them deviate off their program a little bit. It's just understanding that a program is only as good as it's coached, and that nobody in the history of this world has written a perfect program.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my program always changes. There'll be certain things you come back to. There's always things where you kind of go like, why did I stop doing that? It was awesome. And you'll come back to it a year or two later on. But it's important to guess a little bit and have some experimentation there, and, but not get lost in the X's and O's.
Yeah. That's one of the first things I talk with my interns all the time, is that just because it's on the program or on the board for the day does not mean that's written in stone, and that every day, the biggest thing I've learned in the last 3 years is every day the changes you make as a coach, the tweak, the alterations, the reading the athletes, their posture, their mood, and cutting reps, cutting sets, changing exercises. That's the biggest thing that you can never learn in school, but that's how you develop as a coach. And like you said, it's not the program that matters, it's the coaching that matters.
Yeah, I would agree. Amen.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Now, let's talk about we talked about off camera a little bit, but your facility. And I think that is world-class facility. It's unreal. If the listeners haven't had a chance, please check out Next Level. It is, go ahead and describe it, because I wouldn't do it justice.
Yeah, honestly, I'm very fortunate. I never take it for granted. It's kind of like a mecca. We're lucky enough to have 75 yards of field turf. We've got, I want to say, all Olympic platforms, cable chop exercise. So there's always space for the most part. And we've got an amazing staff here. Lucky enough to have the greatest clients. They become friends. It's I always almost feel bad saying client now with most of my people. And it's I don't work. I just get tired at the end of the night. And sometimes I get a little cranky, but it's not work. For every headache, there's an equally bigger blessing, on the other side of it. And the facility is it's beautiful. It allows me, for once with my kids, I can watch kids hit max velocity. And, I've yet to work with a kid. I don't work with any elite level, 10 sprinters. Everybody can reach top speed facility and shut it. So it's been very beneficial for me, to have, a lifelong clients. Some of my kids have been lucky enough to work with for 5-6 years. So that's been very special for me as well.
Yeah. And just to add on, I know you guys have looks like a full-size sand pit. You're sitting right now in the recovery room that you say is underutilized. Correct me.
Yeah.
You guys have a physical therapy.
Yeah, we've got. Yeah, there's great synergy, and that's what's been really nice for me. And I guess the viewers, and probably what you're already doing, Mike, that's setting you apart is, relationships in-house are so amazing, but the more people you have to refer out to, the better you're going to be, the easier your life's going to be, and honestly, the better it's going to be for your athlete's health and your athlete's future. So we've got a great physical therapy clinic that it's kind of a separate entity, but they're awesome to be able to pick their brains, to learn a little bit from them. For me, I know my jurisdiction, with hands-on body and touching athletes. So I trust, the three of our PTs here, Ethan, Chantel, and Matt, that I can literally just open a door, if a kid tweaks something on the turf, and send them right into our awesome PT staff. There's always communication. That's so healthy for a strength and conditioning coach or a coach at the high school level, is to get to know your AT, your team doctor, your physical therapist. It's only going to make your program better. And like I said, it's going to only lead to, a longer shelf life for your athlete. And then, from there, it's good business practice. You
Yeah.
refer people to them, they'll refer people back to you. So it's a win-win situation. The more you can create win-win relationships, that's the art of networking and the art of living, I guess. And a great book for the reader, which we'll probably talk about a little later on, is Networking is a Contact Sport. And so many people view networking in terms of what can that person do for me? And I think brilliant people like you, Mike, and there's a lot of other great coaches in the industry that look at networking as in, how can I help this guy? How can I help push this brand or push this person? What can I do for this coach to make them better? What can I do for this athlete, this family to make them better? And, it's amazing the connections you make. And, we've seen athletes here at Next Level create jobs and opportunities for themselves, post-collegiately or post-athletically, just because of, the communication, the relationships they've created over the years.
Yeah, like you're saying, we're oftentimes, both of us, in at 5, 6 a.m. and work until 7, 8, 9 p.m. And it's a long day, a lot of sessions on your feet. Like you said, we love what we do, but at the end of the day, we're pretty tired. But it's that relationships, the people we get to meet, the connections that makes it all worthwhile. Yeah.
And you and I both know, again, for the listener, Mike's dad was one of my first coaches at Wisconsin Whitewater. My high school and college days just really made me realize that, guys like Mike, I fell in love with the X's and O's at an early age, and we're wigging out over cool articles and cool gadgets. But the blessing of coaching is you realize after a year or even a week that it's pretty fun, it's pretty rewarding, and emotionally it's more rich. And we don't train robots, we train people. And, a great line I stole from one of the USATF certification courses, I said, is you never coach the event or coach the athlete, you coach the person. And once you start making that connection, you're going to get better results. But I guess at the end of the day, when we're all 60 years old or 70 years old, you're going to look back at this time, and what matters most won't be that you took a 4.4 guy to a 4.38. It was that you made relationships. You got invited to weddings. People called you their – maybe they'll name their kid after you. Maybe if somebody's listening, we'll get a Zweifel Gifford, first and middle name. But, who knows? It's a beautiful industry. I always tell people, like you could probably agree, Mike, it's the second best job in the world that you can get paid for besides being the athlete. And they always say the best coaches are just really frustrated athletes. And that's why it's ego in the coach is such a big concept now in the industry. And you can't let your ego completely die, because a little bit of that competitiveness is still pretty healthy. But in the end, no coach ever won a gold medal, and it's really important, obviously, to keep in touch with what got you here and just to remember why you're doing it.
Yeah. And one thing I tell people is I get to wear sweatpants and a sweatshirt every day. I get to listen to loud music.
Yeah.
I get to have fun. I get to basically play with the athletes. It's a blast. That makes up for the 12-hour days, working Saturdays, Sundays. But if I
don't have to shave, you get to carry that cool mustache too. Right?
If I had to wear a suit every day, I don't know what I'd do. I'd go crazy. But there's definitely just awesome aspects in that. They make up for the long days.
Agreed.
So let's say, our last kind of 5 questions here. In the next 5 years or so, what do you see as a trend, the strength conditioning, sports performance coach? What trend do you see is coming in the next 5 years?
So I think, just to kind of reiterate where we're at, with this now information age booming, we went from the strength and conditioning, like elite FTS boom, where everything was powerlifting based. Now we're kind of realizing the importance of movement. So like, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Spinea, and guys like that, and Perry Nicholson are making waves. People are understanding now that if you want to get an athlete to sprint better or lift better, movement's so important, and the way we breathe is so important. All these cool things. Now monitoring is huge. These new tools and new gadgets. But we just talked about it. At the end of the day, it comes back to the person. And when I was in my early 20s, I picked up a random book called You'll See It When You Believe It. And it was written by a guy named Dr. Wayne Dyer, who just passed away, but he was a brilliant author. And I remember his book was all about perception, and that whatever perception you have of the world, the lens that which you look at the world, shapes your reality. And for me, that was kind of like an aha moment where I'm learning just kind of, it was almost like its own theology. It's, people want to knock it, but it's almost a positive thinking movement. But I think we're headed now over the next 5 years of just understanding now how to communicate better with the athlete and just to cement that connection. And, guys like Brett Bartholomew are now kind of at the forefront. If you look at our industry, we've become really good at taking other concepts and taking that lateralized thought and making it and turning it into strength and conditioning. So I think now we're going to understand the power of psychology, the power of the connection you can make with somebody, understanding, that, before I ever put my hands on somebody or tell them what they're doing in the weight room, it starts with their learning type, with their personality, with however they were conditioned at whatever perceptions they have of training. So I'm expecting that obviously to take off, and, understanding the thinker is going to be the most important part of what we're doing over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's going to really set us apart, with the industry is, you already know, you look at what we do from a day-to-day perspective, and, the relationships we share with our clients can be mentor, brother, older brother. Some people are fatherly figures, their clients, friends, psychiatrists, psychologists, all these different things. And it's really this all-encompassing job. But the one thing I know 8 years in is, a lot of times you want to think of this industry as black and white, and it's almost all gray area. And, the power of what we do is in the gray area. So understanding that life is in the gray, coaching is in the gray. And I think that making that connection with the athlete, making connections in the industry is going to be so important. Just look at what guys like you are doing, making connections, with people all across the world and the country. This used to be such an ego-based industry that nobody wanted to talk to each other, and in the end, who's that going to affect? It's going to affect you, the coach, but also the athlete. So now you see amazing feats done by athletes all across the world. And it just starts with the humility of people like you, learning from others, and setting the ego aside a little bit as well.
Matt, well said right there. Now, you've given us 2 already. Feel free to name off as many as you want, but name some books that have been a major influence on you as a coach.
Sure. So I think a strength and conditioning book everybody needs to pick up is the High Performance Training Handbook, if I'm right, by Joyce. And obviously he was one of the editors, but there's a slew of amazing different authors in that book. That was a great piece. I know they just came up with a second edition in regards to injury reduction. That's been great. I just picked up, I know we're going to head there in a second, the blogs. I'll botch his last name, but Hank Kryzhinoff, however you pronounce that last name. He's really unique because here's an amazing sprint coach that just thinks in such a unique way. I think him and Stuart are pretty similar in that way, that they're just not one-trick ponies. And, it's about developing a philosophy that's greater than X's and O's and what you see on paper and what you see with X's and O's in terms of workouts. I just picked up The Need for Speed, liked it, just had some good practical advice in it. Some management books I've liked. First Break All the Rules was a great book that I'm just in the process of finishing. And if you look at leadership in the industry, I was jumping on the train that leadership is so much more important than management. And this book has kind of set me straight in that we need to be able to do both. We need to be able to lead and manage. And, the types of roles and positions you set upon your kids and your staff and your employees and the atmosphere you set for the culture that you're in is going to really help with development and with success. And then I got to put this out there, the Bible. I'm a Christian coach. I tell people all the time, the Bible is the best leadership book you will ever find. And if you're not interested in theology or Christ, go through Proverbs. Proverbs has the best, easy advice for people. It's just the simplest guide towards living. And, you can't stray too far from the word. All these cool self-help books I like to read, these leadership books, in certain ways, they always root back into the Bible.
Absolutely. You kind of ventured that way, but give us some of your favorite websites or blogs or kind of anything online that you would recommend to strength and conditioning coaches.
Sure. So I grew up as a Charlie Francis message board kid and a elite track kid. So I was like an internet troll that never posted, just read everybody else's thoughts when I was a young kid.
Same here.
Yeah. And so that's how I kind of started to sharpen my sword, or I guess fall on my own sword, I guess you could say, if you read the wrong things. But that led me to, like, you know, the elite FTS boom and reading Joe DeFranco and the internet coaches in the early years. So now I'm trying to get a little bit further away from the message boards and get back into philosophy and the old school stuff, you know, the super training, you know, pieces of this world, and I guess take it all with a grain of salt. But I'm about to become a Altus friend on December 1st. So if you go to my website or follow my social media, you'll get a big discount. I just started working with their education platform, and it's been amazing. It's too much good information, I guess, for one guy to handle. So that's been really unique. I've been, like I said, a big fan of Stu McMillan's for a long time. I'm trying to think of what else. You know, I guess now we're in the day of the age where it's just there's too much to read, you know. So it's really important to try to figure out who the best guys are in the industry and not get persuaded by all the information and just still get rooted back into the classics, you know.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. One I didn't have on the list, but here's one for you, okay? You have the ability to go to dinner with 3 people, dead or alive. What 3 people you take to dinner with you?
Oh, my God, that's a crazy question. And I don't know them right now.
Yep, you may not know them, dead or alive, but no family. Sorry, no family, just anybody.
Yeah.
Bring to dinner 3 people, 3 guests. You get to pick
Christ, duh. Like, that'd be the easiest, right? I always want to say you wish it was like something strength and conditioning based, but I'm trying to think. I would love to take Abe Lincoln. You know, here's something I never knew about Abe Lincoln. He failed his way to being the president of the United States of America.
Yeah.
Like, the guy, if you look at some of his failures, he failed more than he won. And that's so unique. So somebody like him who was so profound would be pretty cool. And, let me think back. It'd be really cool to take a sports science mind out, like a Yuri Verkhoshansky or somebody crazy like that. But something tells me that might be a boring meal,
Yeah. Awesome, Matt. Well, hey, where can the listeners find you? On social media, website, et cetera, et cetera?
Like we talked about earlier, check out Next Level Athletics. That'll kind of link you back to, I guess, our home site. I've got my own self-branding site, CoachGiff.com. You can look me up at Giff Strength on Twitter, and then Coach Giff on Instagram. And, I think those are my 3 avenues.
Well, Matt, it's been a blast, man. A lot of great information shared today. I really appreciate you taking out the time and sharing so much insight into your knowledge and your training.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike.
Awesome.
Keep up the great work.
Appreciate it. Join me in thanking Matt for taking the time today and sharing such wonderful insight into his training and all things speed development. As always, please, if you gain anything from this podcast, please share it on the social media outlet of your choice, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and give Matt a big thanks for taking the time and giving such good insight into his training, his career, his path, and how to get athletes faster. As always, we'll see you on the other side.